Thank you very much. Oops. I love it when you click a button and you almost think you've lost one of your you're closing out a screen. So I'm trying to make sure I can see everything. Audio working?
Perfect.
All right, fantastic. So thank you for bringing me on. And
Yeah.
I can see the panel slowly coming in here. I'll just do a quick introduction. My name is Eric Charles. I'm the former Chief Marketing Officer at Exactly Corporation, which people know for managing incentive compensation. Nowadays, I'm working as the fractional CMO at Dispatch Track, but I also still do a lot of advising work with startups and big companies with Sales Globe and Ohana operators. And it's been a fun path here of we all know the AI game, or we think we know, or we pretend to know it, or but I think that it's that rubber hits the road thing. And earlier on a LinkedIn post that I saw, it was a wrap up from yesterday's sessions here, was this comment of, we still don't have that self-driving Uber. I'm like, hold it, we do. I take Waymo in San Francisco. I love it. First time I did it, I was a little paranoid. This car pulls up, there's nobody in it. It has my initials on this little rotating disco ball at the top. I get in the car, and it did a better job of driving me through the back streets of San Francisco to get out to the Sunset District than anytime I'm behind the wheel. I'll freely admit it. I mean, it was smooth start, and I've started using a few other things. So we are there. I'm sorry. AI is more involved in anything they want to admit. And so today's panel, let's talk about another application. Cars is easy. That's kind of the default right now. It's this whole world of compensation. It's because there's still humans at the company. There are still people we need to pay to do things. I have, in my career, some of the absolute worst bits of compensation plans written, and lack of understanding and equity. And by equity, I mean both fair pay practices and the use of equity for Silicon Valley, let's face it. So before we start, or as a way of starting, I'm going to call out each panelist one sentence about who you are, and then one sentence about the weirdest way you have used artificial intelligence so far since it became available. And I'll even say I used it to write a poem for my wife for Valentine's Day. Her response was, "This isn't your work. This is garbage." She's like, "You do a better job." So I felt really good and also really bad for being lazy. So Jonathan, introduce yourself, please, and your weird AI story.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, good to be here with everyone else. Excited to be here. So my name is Jonathan Carford. Some people call me Coach. I'm the founder of GTMA Academy, advisor to 5 or 6 startups, and love this whole conversation. My past history was in operations and enablement, so this topic of compensation is near and dear and close to my heart, both from an ex-salesperson and as a ops enablement guy. Weirdest thing, probably trying to see what I'd look like with different shades of hair. Probably the weirdest thing, that or making chicken Alfredo, which actually did a really good job. It wasn't weird, but it was really good. So how about that?
I love it. Jen.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Jen Steele. I am CEO and co-founder of Sound GTM. We're a referrals marketplace. I grew up through being a CMO, so I have a lot in common with y'all. And the weirdest AI, see, I'm not that creative. I'm like, I have used it to make lazy posts for people in my marketplace so that they could help us get the word out. And those got weird, but it wasn't a weird use as much as Claude kind of lost it momentarily.
All right, Jason.
Hi, Jason Naparelski. I am ex-Amazon, ex-Google, ex-Oracle, now working with smaller companies that are more sane as a consultant and chief revenue officer and go-to-market, I guess, overall. And I guess the weirdest thing that I did was I had AI generate a picture of a regular-sized elephant riding a regular-sized monkey. So I did that.
I love it. All right, Blake.
Hey, I'm Blake Williams, CEO of Demandy, and we help people scale with their existing networks. And I think the weirdest thing that I have done with AI so far is had it write a song or sing a song in my singing voice that I love, which is fun.
All right, Darren.
I'm Karen Sage, and CMO at locally, which does retail Unity. Probably the funniest thing I did, I got tired of answering questions, so I created a CMO bot for myself, and it was too nice. It was, totally unlike me. And so I created a snarky CMO profile so that they could really get the real Karen when they approached it.
I think that teaching the AI to speak in our voice is one of the key things. And a company I advise, Change Engine, they do email, they do automated like HR messages, and that's one of the biggest things. They have to teach it. So if you want the CEO to say happy birthday, it has to say it the way your CEO would say happy birthday. And the funny thing about it is a couple CEOs I've worked for, or even myself, I'm like, I don't know if I really want to teach the AI that voice, but that's okay. I like the idea. All right, let's kick this off. Jonathan, I'm actually going to come back to you to start, but I want everybody to jump in only because you said your ops background.
Yeah.
One of the fun things in compensation is, and it's funny, I've done projects where people said, "Can you design the sales plans for a company of this size in this industry?" And here are the titles we have. And so I'll do some work for them. They'll come back and say, "Well, except this person is really an SMB-ish with a side order of customer success." And all of a sudden I'm like, "Look, I'll do it. You realize how much you're spending on my billable rate, my hourly rate to keep on doing this?" Which brings me to the question. Yeah. All right, Jonathan, will you trust an AI to write as individualized commission plans as a company wants? Do you think it's ready?
This is a good question because it kind of goes on. I asked the CFO a similar question about would you trust an AI to help you write a 10K and publish it? The answer is usually no. So it's not quite there yet, but I do think it'd give you some interesting insights into what you could do. So I come from a heavier enablement ops background where I view compensation or bonus structure as enabler of behavior I'm trying to look for, or how do I help a team be able to collaborate together? And so I want to compensate for that, so that we don't, I've been too many times where I've had to redo compensation because they enabled the wrong behavior. So if I can have an AI give me insights of what ways I can be able to deliver that, then bring it on. Whatever I can do to make that happen more often, or bring the insights I wouldn't have had before. Because the one thing I love about AI is it gives me insights of things that I have a very narrow point of view consciously, and AI opens up my field of vision so I can see other points of view or other possibilities I may not have had, and even run different scenarios to where I could kind of go in and saying, here's the personality or culture of my team. Give me 3 or 4 scenarios I can go through hypothetically with specific numbers and really figure out what does that look like profit wise or behavior wise or any other factors.
Mm-hmm. Raise your hand if you want. By the way, I should have said this at the beginning. Hit the raise hand button, or if not, I'll call people out. I do teach sometimes, and I can be really obnoxious that way.
Yeah.
How about AI testing the plans? I mean, one of the ones I mentioned, I worked at Exactly. The CEO, Chris Cabrera, wrote a book years ago called Game the Plan. It was all about how reps will get an incentive plan and try to manipulate it. And one of the things I love to do is whenever I design a plan, I think, okay, if I just want to bank cash in and not care about anything else, what could I do to make the most money just for myself? All right, Blake. See.
Yeah. So one cool way that I've played with AI is ultimately around this go-to-market forecasting. And what I love about it is that you can feed it the ceilings and the floors on a wide variety of variables, almost anything that could be imagined, and then you can allow it to randomize what might occur based on the ceilings and floors of benchmarks that you know to be true just from operating. Right, that you wouldn't perform any lower than this, and it would probably be irrational or amazing if you perform better than that, but not to allow that to happen. And then run that scenario 5,000 times, law of large numbers, and see where that actually ends up, and print the regression line, and then see what those next additional tasks would be to shift that regression line further north or up the line. So I think the scenario planning instance is fantastic if you know where you're at for sure, and then you can make some better assumptions about what those floors and ceilings are.
I like that. We'll come back to the data side. I saw Karen and Jen both had their hands up. So Karen, how about you
Yeah,
first?
so one of the things that we don't talk a lot about is, when you talked about compensation and sort of incenting things and teamwork, ability to use AI and basically incent the ability to use AI in everything we do. So I think like in SDR, for example, it's kind of built in because the number of ops, et cetera, you're going to use to whatever's your advantage. Some of the teams that it's not so value-based compensation. I think we need to encourage more of that to say, hey, go ahead and it's not cheating if you use ChatGPT to come up with your ideal profile, or if your, conversion rates are higher. So actually building that into our comp, I think is a really important aspect.
All right, so Lee, I want to ask, how would you do that? So I've got an SDR, and I've told them to use. I'm like, guys, why do you keep coming asking me on how to message this? Did you ask any one of the? You don't even have to pay for ChatGPT or Gemini or some of these others for the entry level. Perplexity will even do it for you a bit, So how would you incentivize an SDR to actually use a free tool that they should be?
So are you asking me?
Yeah. No, you said that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go a little deeper on that. Sorry. Yeah.
Absolutely. I would take the value based and I would say if you engaged AI to basically make this happen, brownie point. And if your deal, your opportunity was created with AI, and I put attribution on it, wrote the copy for some of your cold emails that basically made the phone call for you, no matter how it was used. I'd actually use an accelerator in the formula for how I comped.
Okay. No, love it. No, I love it. Jen?
Okay, I'm not sure I would comp on using AI. And the reason being that AI is great until it loses its mind. AI is horrible at following rules. And so that's one thing to remember. Like, unlike somebody that you're just like, this is the structure of our email. 5 emails in, AI is going to forget that you ever did that. Then you say, what did you do wrong? And then it tells you. And asking an SDR to spend that time, spend that amount of time like figuring it out. I think I would more comp on when we see people use AI, they do this and that faster and they get better results. I would much rather comp on results that you can basically only get if you're using AI than to comp on just using it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've seen. It's like the smarter, not smarter, perhaps more empowered. I don't know, best word, because of the SDRs that are suddenly like building out their own cadences in that way when they've just got a bunch to go for. But Blake, you had your hand up.
Yeah. So before this, I went and talked to Yuri he's the CEO of AI SDR. And one of the interesting things that we talked about is the fact that SDRs are not the only people using AI SDR. Marketing teams are using AI SDR to generate those open digital conversations for which the handoff can happen to a human. Especially as we see signal adoption start to become very, very popular and make its way in as teams are rationalizing that. And we think about compensation, it's not just the seller who's going to be compensated. Maybe it's marketing, right? That we need to think about how do we compensate them differently if 60% of the teams using the SDR are marketers.
I've experimented with. It's funny. My first interaction with an AI SDR was from the team over at 6 Cents, where it was an email conversation to book a meeting with me at a Forrester Summit, and it was brilliantly done. I had no idea it was an AI until I sat down for the lunch, and they passed that on. So I've seen that work really, really well. Jason, you had your hand up though.
Yeah, so I just wanted to zoom out a bit because we're awfully tactical, awfully fast here. And I just wanted to kind of zoom out and say a couple things. One is I think that compensation is unbelievably broken from the top to the bottom, especially CEO compensation is now 1,000 to 1 on the average person, and then all the way down. And I come from an enterprise background, so sellers, like quarterbacks, get way too much credit and way too much blame for how they perform. And Blake triggered me because he said other people need to be compensated. And I think that we should be paying for work from a compensation perspective, not necessarily end results. And that way you've got a much cleaner line, and that all of the people involved in an enterprise sale should be compensated and should have a large proportion of their compensation on that. All of that said, compensation is way too high. Our margins are way out of whack, especially in tech, and we have a come up that's coming. And it is going to come hard, and it's going to come fast. And AI gives us an opportunity to react to that significantly. And what we can do is really what we should be using AI for is not trying to refine, who gets a little bit more or who gets a little bit less, but looking at how do we change a compensation model altogether? How do we use AI to analyze stuff that we didn't have time to analyze before? How do we pay for the top of the funnel activity rather than the back of the funnel activity? And all of that stuff can be done faster and easier with AI. All of that said, the time of bullshit is over. Last week's election told us that we're into a reality stream here now, and that we need to align our compensation, our programs, and everything to what the reality is, and very simply stop misaligning our customers' goals to our sellers and our people's goals.
All right. Blake?
Yeah, so I think that brings up a massive topic of attribution, right? When we think about attribution, the evil that drives it is that, it comes down to who's performing and doing what, right? And who ultimately gets compensated. I think it creates that negative behavior and siloed functionality. And if we don't have to worry about tracking the final outcome, like Jason, you were just saying, but we can worry about all the different steps along the way and start to learn all the right behaviors and get directionally accurate. We can forget about solving for at the end of the curve to try to optimize to the nth degree who gets credit, and have it be binarily or zero sum game where everybody gets to contribute. And now we can catch up on those microtransactions of effort across all teams and let AI think about how to solve for the compensation around that. So I think that's a beautiful opportunity that would drastically impact the way that we work just because the compensation model shifted.
That's an interesting idea, but I love the idea of microtransactions, or really micro incentives. My only concern is there's also the question of line of sight. If, like, I suddenly just get a quarterly check or even a weekly check, and it adds up from 100 different things I did, it's not necessarily going to change my behavior. It's going to recognize my behavior. That would be, there's a path there, but there's plenty of research I've been engaged in that has shown that, like, if you put too many measures on people, they just kind of keep on doing what they were doing, because they, the whole idea of a good incentive should be to tell you what to focus on. But I think there's a bridge there. I'm gonna keep thinking about that one. Jen?
One hesitation I have when we say things like, well, everybody who's involved should get credit, is that not everybody gets incentivized by money. And so, for example, way early days HubSpot, like I was employee number 90 there. And I was one of the managers on the consulting team, and the consultants were more CS. They were implementation. They loved customers. And when we decided to put on a bonus based on performance, no, we weren't decreasing their pay. They freaked out because it's not how they were accustomed to being compensated. It's not how they were motivated in the slightest. And so we can actually kind of hand wave some attribution away if we're talking about compensation, just because not everyone is coin operated, to use a dangerous term with sales.
Yes. I there's a term I've used before is, are you coin operated or coin recognized? And the coin can properly recognize. Jason, because you did bring us back up high, and I didn't get a chance to say thank you for that. That was perfect, because it's so easy to go down any given rabbit hole when we only have 38 minutes left. So go.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Jen, that not everybody is money motivated, but everybody is score motivated. If they're not score motivated, they're not winners. Winners have to be score motivated. That's how you win. So I think talent goes where the money is. And I think smarter people understand the value of compensation. And I think everybody is more incented if they know that if they do X work, they will get X reward, whatever that reward is. And if you have somebody that isn't motivated by that, they're not a winner.
Preach.
I think that's back to the depends on the stage of where they are in the game too, though. But let's get one of the challenges of AI, and I know in some of the models that I've built is it's there's the GIGO, the garbage in, garbage out, but it's not as much that as like it's the how much data do you need to feed it to be able to get those prediction lines. I mean, yes, I can go back to grad school statistics and say, hey, you need 35 data points to properly plot a line. 32 was the one my professor used to say. At least at that point, you can be somewhere there. Nowadays, we can have 10 million. I remember some of the early, being able to run Monte Carlo simulations, and the fact that you could run 10,000 simulations at the time. This is early 2000s on my ThinkPad. I would just go have dinner, come back, and I would have a beautiful graph. And he's like, who's running 10,000 simulations? I did. Why? I could. Why not? And he's like, well, you didn't get any additional value. But then but that was a mathematical model, a prediction model with different performance curves. With data, it's another issue. Like I was doing some data from somebody that collected a lot of performance data, across all their customers, and was trying to run some lines. And there's some ridiculous outliers, and realized that the data set had all the test cases. Every time somebody logged on, they're like, hold it, let's just see what happens if this goes on. And that got buried in the data set. And yes, the statisticians will say, there's numerical smoothing, there's elimination of outliers, but sales is all about outliers. 80-20 rule. There are reps that bring in 400% of quota, but there's also fake numbers in there. So how do we get the data we need to feed the AI? Anyone want to jump on that one? Come on, Jonathan, you're the ops guy. Where are we going to feed this AI engine that's going to look at all this data that Jason's talking about, that Jen's talking about with Blake talking about microtransactions? Do we trust Salesforce, Marketo, HubSpot, Apollo, and all of the different data sets? Are we going to bring in outside data sets? How are we going to do that?
It's a good question because it depends on the capabilities of the model you're using. Because you can't always necessarily rely on a Claude or ChatGPT. Not that they can't do it, but for advanced stuff, they're not trained on that particular model set up front, and neither is Salesforce for that matter. So one would be the context of the information you can give, because AI thrives on context. You got to make sure you have the context needed, and then the training model to be able to execute. Because if you're asking a word-based, text-based logic model to perform some advanced statistical analysis, it's not going to be able to handle it because it doesn't know how to do it. So I think one is making sure you know the capabilities of whatever model you might be using, and then two is the output you'll be getting. As an example, like if I wanted to have secure place, that's one thing is everyone's used to ChatGPT or Claude. I don't know if I'd give all the information. Like I'm an AI nut, but there's some things I wouldn't give AI to do for me because it's privacy data and other things I need to figure out that I can't give to an open model. So it's making sure you have something you can work with, whether that's your own model or an outsourced one, which there's more options now than was before, but you just got to be really careful, that kind of stuff. And then lastly, talk about this, the thing that came coming to mind was the whole transparency and fairness thing with compensation. If you're not able to really truly identify and communicate clearly what that is, AI is a black box. If you don't understand what's coming back out of it, so you can explain it. You can have a lot of dicey situations as a result. So I don't know if it answers your question, but that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, well, because I think that's the thing is because I think of you can certainly take a license for one of the AI models and then allow it to only see your internal data. There's a way of, you can put it, but then that's just your internal data.
Right.
And that's assuming that, so then it's like, well, whose data am I going to license to put into this?
Right.
And I think, and actually, Jason, I was actually going to call you because you were talking about some of these overpay, underpay, and I was like, overpay, underpay based on what? What are you comparing to? We pay the head of Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles $750,000 a year. And then we can go down some of these. There are public. There are certain types of information that's very public, and then every now and then, I find out what something's going to cost, and so like comp data is one of those things of. Yeah, there's lots of comp data sets. I know some of the people that run them, but they're still oftentimes, not all companies are uploading that information. But go ahead, Jason. You did have your hand up, so yeah.
Yeah. So I think AI right now in its current state is definitely a trust but verify kind of situation, right? You can't 100% accept that it's going to be good, right? And I've had tussles with AI myself, and I've just been angry, and I've screamed at Siri. I'm not proud of that, but I have many times. But I think one of the big factors is the blind spot of AI is your own data and how it mixes. And again, there's a significant risk, as Jonathan was saying, of allowing that to participate in the whole model. You can get specific information from specific places if you ask the questions. The great thing that AI does from a perspective, from a compensation model perspective, and again, I'm looking at it from like, I have an opportunity to change it completely. I'm throwing out the baby and the bathwater, and I'm doing a whole new model. So AI gives you a starting point in which you can find those benchmarks, right? How did name what your roles are, what you're doing, what does a successful one do from a top of the funnel perspective? How many transactions per day can you expect, or how many does a world class do it? How many does the low class do it, and kind of triangulate? So I think there's that information. But the hole in AI right now is training it on your internal data and using that internal data securely, and using it to give you results that are applicable to you. Because one of the problems is, and this is the problem with adopting Salesforce, adopting their processes, adopting those things, is that if you follow a leader, you follow a leader, and you're always behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so your own data is the key to getting out of that.
Yeah, but that's assuming your own data is market.
Huge assumption. Huge assumption. Everybody's data is garbage. Like really, especially if you use Salesforce data where you've had salespeople enter it. Salespeople are the worst possible people in the world to enter data, and that is what if you're using that as something to judge your models on, you're already failing as it is.
Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, I was just I was thinking back to my days in college at in econ and in my MBA and things like that, and I think the whole what's really useful is being able to arrive at a framework that has kind of abstracted away or assumed away some of the nuances so that you can get to a model that allows you to be more effective once you do start adding the real-time data into it, and then leverage AI to tell you when you're outside of the tolerances of that model, or just validating what your model assumptions are, I think is a better use than just letting it calculate everything, because it couldn't go, like to Jen's point, to what Jason's saying, your data can be off and it can be crazy. So if you're dealing with like a level 10 crazy, then you probably want
to. I always love a fellow student of the dismal science, and actually this reminds me of my favorite line about economics, though, is the greatest line in economics is all of the things being equal.
Right.
And that's the problem with these data models. It's like, how much do we have to bring in here to actually make sure we have the right timely stuff? Karen.
So, it's funny, we talk about this data. We rely on crappy data today. So, I mean, I think we over sort of rotate on how disastrous that's going to be, in the sense that I would say today we have lots of issues, especially in terms of attribution, in terms of all these things that we've been talking about. There's like key issues with the data that we so profoundly embrace to solve those problems today.
No,
it's chronically broken.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I think of a lot of comp survey data in the old days when you used to like just buy the annual report from somebody. I always said that was 18-month-old data by the time you got it.
At least.
And I worked for Sun Micro, and I don't think I'm violating an NDA from 25 years ago. We targeted the 65th percentile of total cash compensation was our gain. 65th. But it was always based on a year-old data. And this was just as the dot-com boom was kicking off. We were selling a lot of servers to all the dot-coms that needed a server. And every time an employee got mad at their manager, they didn't leave because of pay. They left because of the manager. But the second they went on the market, they found out they could be making 30% more, because there was such an acceleration, of a hiring and buying it. But actually on that crappy data, just to have a fun little switch it around, one of the biggest challenges, or one of the many challenges in sales, let's say, is the quota. What's the quota? Well, the executives said they want to grow 20%. So they gave 25% growth to the head of sales, and he gave 30% growth to the sales team. hired more sales reps and threw them into random territories. And I always remember Adam Eckert over at a buddy of mine, Simon Kucher, would talk about like, and companies like to put like enterprise sales reps in any city that has an NFL team. That was their data analysis for a lot of companies, because you figure if they've got an NFL team, they must have enough business. And I used to laugh. I said, "Do you know how long Los Angeles didn't have any NFL teams, and now they have two, and San Diego has none? Does that mean San Diego is?" He's like, "Yeah, it was a bad model." So with that bad model, how can we get the AIs to start building some better sales territories and then do better sales quotas? Just because we talk about measure and performance, what can we expect out of some? All right, Jen, take the lead.
Almost anybody would be better than a first-time founder drawing a straight line from friends and family sales, right? I mean, the AI is not going to get that a whole lot worse than the humans will in a lot of cases. Now, when you're talking about more mature organizations, like then at least you should have some knowledge and experience that you can test, right? So it's almost like run two in parallel, or design yours, have AI design it, and maybe use the AI to make yours better.
Yeah.
Right? But should the AI then say, not only is it, I'll get you, yeah, should the AI then say, great, so we've designed the territories, but Blake is a brand new rep, and we know it takes brand new reps can only bring in about 2/3 of what a rep with 2 years of experience, and hopefully that data, by the way. Do we adjust it at that point too? How can we let the AI actually create achievable, measurable quotas based on that territory as well? Because territory has to equal quota. If it doesn't, then they're both made up. Okay, go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, and that's right where I was going to go. Is once it does establish the quota, or we establish the quota, I think it's more important that we understand, because it won't be binary. It'll be, what are the contributing factors on why this may not be hit, and then understanding those insights. Right? Why wouldn't that rep hit that quota, and diving into those insights so that you can prepare, or at least actively seek out how to solve for that faster and make that number more likely.
Jonathan?
I was just thinking there's these other factors involved, like there's the regional perspective, whether it's worldwide or US only or whatever. Then you have the personality and the skill level of a salesperson, which may match West Coast versus East Coast, or the product market fit, or the industry they're going after. Like there's all these different factors you have to take into consideration that I think AI would be phenomenal at if it had the context to help you make those decisions and say, hey, based on the personality profile, the industry, the what you're going after revenue wise and quota, this person would be the best match because of these reasons. And that's something that me as a human, I can do it, but it takes time. So having something to help me kind of give those insights quickly would be best. The one thing you have to be aware of, though, is just the downside of it is just the assumptions of the model, to make sure it's not marking something more important than what it should be, to make sure it's just more of a feedback mechanism versus the decision maker.
Yeah. Jason?
Yeah, it just triggered something for me, the assumptions. And so few companies test their assumptions if on a regular basis or ever. And AI is a real easy path to hell. If you trust your assumptions and you write the questions based on your assumptions, then the AI will lead you down a bad, dark place, because if your assumptions are wrong, because AI cannot think. And so if you want it to come up with your assumptions, it won't work.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull this in, and I'll get to you, Jen, because I love it. Some input from Julia here. It's like, are we ready? And I'll read her comment. Can AI A/B test incentives? And I'm going to go slightly different. Is it time to start, because the AI will let us A/B testing even spiffs? We're going to do this spiff in this territory and a different one, because Blake and I got into an argument about which one would work better. And I said, fine, I'm going to run this in California. You run it in New York. Let's let the best contest win. Now, Jonathan, that ignores your comment that each market is a micro market, so we might miss it. But do we do something like that potentially? I mean, it's a thought, and noodle on it. But Jen had her hand up.
Although I did just get cold chills at the thought of A/B testing full comp plans if anybody talks to each other. But I was going to say, kind of building on what Jason said, like AI can be self-critical. And there was something that Jason said about like working with it, right? It's not just here's the data, come up with this. It's, wait, what can go wrong with this? Well, what about this assumption, right? As we work with it, it's not a one and done. It's more of a collaboration because it can't think. But I love the way that you're like, so what's wrong with the model you build? Or how can people game the model you build? And it'll just tell you, which is better than any, sales ops person I've ever worked alongside.
Well, and that's this question on optimizing the compensation structure. Both how much pay should be at risk. How many factors can we have in there? How can we optimize all these little comp structures? Yes, and I agree, by the way, Jason, with from the CEO down to the someone in the mailroom. If anybody still had mailrooms, I use that someday. I won't even be able to make that reference. As I said, I realized, hold it, nobody gets
Amazon packages still come in.
That's true. Yeah. So so now it's package delivery instead of the mail. My undergraduate alma mater now has a package delivery. They don't allow packages to the dorms. They force it all to a central location because it was just too many Amazon trucks all over campus, just double parking, running up and down dorm rooms that are all under a lockdown. But, can we get the AI to sit there? First, it's going to take humans thinking about what matters at each one of those roles. What do we want out of the person in the mailroom, for example? Can we measure it? And then can we build it into the plan? And now I'm just going to go in order. Jason first.
Yeah, so I think Jen said something brilliant that I think a lot of people don't consider is that AI, not only can it not think, but it doesn't have an ego. So it's not offended by the questions. And, everybody's been in a room with your sales ops guy and you've asked them, why is this like that? And they've gotten defensive and it's gotten the wrong way or it's been the wrong way. Or you ask a sales manager what's happening in your market and then they want to color it. Sales managers are great at this, coloring all of the different things, telling you about the delivery where you just want to see the baby. And AI doesn't do that stuff. So when you have the controversial questions, AI is a real good resource for it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Jonathan.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. One was to your point, Jen, about people, you can go back and forth. I think it's interesting to think of like your unconscious incompetencies that you don't know what you don't know. And so therefore, if you have assumptions you're not aware of, like you don't know to even prompt to mitigate or correct that, which is, you have to be careful. But that's cool about AI is you can say, what am I not asking? They can tell you that, which is nice. The other thought was too, is that your question earlier, Eric, around compensation is like, there's so many things around correlation and causation that becomes a whole, data scientist fun time and nightmare at the same time, because you have a hypothesis that if you do one thing, it has outcome X results, but you may not be looking at all the data sets going into it to say, yes, it performed better, but there's also in California, which had this thing happen in the marketplace that also was a factor, not just the compensation, So right. Making sure you have that data accessible, so it's not just looking at one narrow set, to make sure that you don't assume that was the case and that incentive will work everywhere else, because it may not,
No, that's a great point on historical, because I was dealing with some construction materials companies, and Hurricane Sandy had a huge impact in that space of both killing business in some territories and then soon after it, a ridiculous amount of business after that, going back and forth. Blake?
Just taking that further, because it is this infinite game. What about being able to trigger different behaviors in the individual sellers, like those micro behaviors, to say, hey, what if you tried this? Or hey, do 10% more of this, and let's see how that adjusts you potentially hitting that quota, and then being able to see if those things actually have again, testing our assumptions in real time to drive real behavior, to see if that does impact, to learn what to measure and what to drive.
So you're going down almost the AI coaching model then.
Almost, right?
Yeah. Because I was going to touch on that, and I'll come back to it, but I know Jason had his hand up.
Yeah, so what Jonathan was saying is that there's often other factors at work here in the success or failure of a sales rep, and the quality of the rep, is often not, the story is not told by their sales maid. In an enterprise, it's very common that you get some big hitters, rainmakers, and they just get fed all the good deals, and everybody else that's coming up is suffering, and working that. And that's why I think the compensation model is moving up the funnel and less on the final funnel can identify your potential A players that could probably close more deals for you if they have the opportunities, and allow you to attribute the opportunities in a more equitable way based on their actual performance, rather than this guy closed that last deal, so let's give him the next deal, which is basically how it happens now. So, and if you are in the trap of compensating on the final thing, you end up with two things. You end up with that monthly meeting on the 30th of the month, where the the VP of sales screams at everybody, which is completely useless and unhelpful.
Yeah.
And then you end up with the rich getting richer. So the guys that are, and everybody knows the sales guy that never does a darn thing, but he just gets the deals fed to him, and those are going to close regardless. And also, the other thing about compensation on salespeople is that now, particularly in SaaS and tech things, 80% of the sale is done independent of a sales rep. It's done through the website. It's done through YouTube videos. It's done through testimonials and references and other things. So the credit given to them should be equivalent to what the credit of the 20% of what they would have gotten if they would have had to do 100% like in the old days.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a different panel, and it was this question of we won't need sales reps when it's an AI that's running procurement, and then we'll just have our license engine go talk to your license engine to negotiate the final bids of the contract. But as long as procurement is still human, the sales side, you'll still need a human on the other side, and we'll generically use sales on that. I wanted to touch on a little bit there, because you're talking about that end of the month and the forecast. And that's an interesting one, because Salesforce, ties in Einstein to try and do the forecast. Of course, Clary came out and do it. My former employer Exactly purchased Top Ops and now sells that as Exactly forecasting, for looking at all the data, looking at past performance within the company, past performance at the rep level. All of these do this to say, Jonathan is we know he's a sandbagger, so we're going to look at his forecast and we're going to erase it. But Jason's kind of negative, so we know whenever as well, so we know that. But Jen is always happy, but doesn't quite actually hit it. So we're going to decrease that, and it's the AI is trying to look at all that information. Anybody have some good forecasting stories where have you seen AI, really help with the forecast of what's going to happen?
Well, what you said was the wrong problem to solve. First of all, trying to smooth out bad data via AI is not good. You need to get the data better. And the reason why forecasting sucks is that we focus on the bottom of the funnel and not the top of the funnel. It's that simple. So if you align the compensation with the top of the funnel activity, and you're confident what your cookbook is to get a sale, then forecasting happens automatically.
You're confident the cookbook to get a sale, though, that's one of those all other things being equal assumptions, I feel.
That's what AI can run those models and figure out what your cookbook is. Generate the backups and do that.
But that's where we need the AI to read our email, our calendar, our Salesforce instance, and everything else to get anywhere close to it. I think it was people.ai years ago had a way of actually scraping everything and at least updating Salesforce so you actually knew all the people talked to. One of my personal measures from a very physical standard when I was running some sales teams is someone would put something up in the forecast, and if they hadn't talked to legal yet, I was like, not a chance. We are 3 months from the end of the quarter and you don't have legal involved. You are not going to close that, because it's legal. I'm sorry, I love them, but that's the thing. Karen.
So we talk about AI sort of correcting the sales assumptions that they make, and et cetera, et cetera. What happens when AI goes up to the executive and says, that hockey stick you drove, based on, like Jen said, the friends and family, It's ridiculous. Your sales guys can't meet their quotas. You know, the model that you've set is incorrect. What happens then? I mean, does the whole thing implode?
Well, and that's where I was touching on the need for not just your data, and can we get companies to share data somehow to, do you build a consortium of companies who say, hey, we're all kind of in close enough to the same space, maybe not direct competitors, or maybe you do. And of course, the problem there is that whole collusion, Federal Trade Commission, and a few things like that. But there's enough fuzziness there. But Jonathan, you had your hand up. Sorry about that.
Oh no, it's fine. We kind of moved on, but now I have two thoughts. One is
That's all right.
there's tech
I
that
do
exists
watch.
now. Yeah, it's okay. I know you do. There's tech now that exists that does what you're referring to. So like there's one of the companies I advise for, Momentum, has a product that can go back into both emails and calls and then batch the information and put it back into CRM to correct whatever information was missing in the first place. Because we know that salespeople, and again, if you think about it, I don't think they should be responsible for doing the data. They should be responsible for retrieving it out of the customer, but actually writing it down. Now we have AI to do it. Why do we have them to do that? I want them focusing on the customer,
Right.
So having that capability can change that dynamic so the bad data goes to hopefully better data. And then secondly, you mentioned something before about market sharing information. I had a thought around that, which was, if you think about the other side of it, there is that risk of what's the word? Uniformity. So if the market as a whole all knows what each other's doing, it takes away from differentiating yourself, or it could essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So there's strengths to sharing data, but there's also the weakness of like where do we, how much do you share to take away your competitive advantage?
You follow the leader, you follow the leader.
Yeah.
But as we've learned from any Tom Peters book, again, showing my age, all you need to do is show up in a Tom Peters book and you're no longer the leading company, or they used to call it the Sports Illustrated curse. If you make the cover of Sports Illustrated, it's time to retire and sell off jerseys, because odds are you will not last there. I mean, it was some interesting couple of data elements, and we certainly have seen in the NFL draft how often the fourth or fifth round becomes, the marquee quarterback. And we all have plenty of examples of that one. I mean, that goes back to, like I said, what data are we willing to trust around all this comp? I do think I want to bring up, because Jason, you talked about this going up to the top of the funnel. Oh, that hurt Jen. Jen's harassing me. She had to look up Tom Peters. But yeah, it's all those old business books that used to sit behind you that you pretend to read and then reference them a couple times. It's like the business equivalent of de Tocqueville if you're into political science or history. Everybody quotes it, but nobody ever reads them. I'm nerding out. Sorry, Julia. I tend to do that. But how and where can we go on the top of the funnel is interesting. I jokingly said introducing this is like, at what point do we pay the AI engine a commission? Oh, I'll get I'll increase your capacity to AWS if you can bring in more leads. But at the same time, that is real. And activity-based incentives, I will admit I was against them. The idea of paying salespeople to do their jobs irritated me, until I actually saw a study that was done by the University of Wisconsin. Did it in cooperation with some folks from McKinsey, where they went into a company and they paid the reps, in that case, to simply put in next steps and notes. And they tried paying the reps and paying the managers for that data update. And then what they looked at it over time is that when it was done, they actually got an 8% lift in revenue just by having them do it at the right stage. Now, the other interesting side on that study was that not only did they get the lift in revenue, but there was no difference between just paying the managers or paying the managers and the reps. So it was back to a focus of getting that done. All right, go ahead, Blake.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I talked to Yuri, the CEO at AI SDR, and our business, Demandy, is built on that premise that content is the new sales, because to Jason's point, 80% of the buying process happens long before that. If you can scale content with your network, you end up generating a ton more potential signal, as long as you're curating content around the key scenarios that your audience struggle with. To that point, I asked, how are people buying this AI SDR, and how are they paying for it? right now, to your point, Eric, is that it's very activity driven. So it's like 100 emails sent, or 1,000 emails sent, or 500 signals responded to, and I think it's a great time. I know Jason's definitely going to hit on like incentive structure or measuring the right thing. I've done this like 8 times with him, and he always zooms out the right way. And I think what's really key is like measuring newly opened conversations by that AI SDR. And to that point, if that AI is opening many more digital conversations, then it comes about compensating the SDR or the marketing team on being able to harvest any demand that's raising their hand there. Long digression. I just got excited about the content as the new sales. But take us away, Jason.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think one of the important things is that to know sales leaders, particularly VP sales, CROs, those types of get fired for one reason, not for lack of sales, for poor forecasting. Typically, they get for poor forecasting, because without the forecasting knowledge, you don't have the ability to make shifts, to change, pivot, to adjust resources to get the things you're doing right. And again, the AI really can help without an ego, can say what is going wrong within the sales system. And if you're training the AI to look at the top of the funnel activity, you still have a chance to make a change mid-cycle. Whereas if you're focused on the 30-day screamathon, you've got no chance. So it really is. It could be a game changer if you compensate for the activity. And really, the best salespeople are the ones that are the most boring. They don't go out for lunch. They don't do dinners. They don't do basketball games. They just crank activity. And they are always the ones that are the most successful, the best forecasters, and the ones you'll do. And so if you align your compensation model on trying to make those people, you're going to be very successful.
And I agree. And Blake, just to let you know, when I've used AI SDR, Ted, I'd only pay for booked and held meetings.
That's the way to do it.
But that was my own, because marketing teams, I've run marketing teams where they were measured on stage 2 pipeline. Mm-hmm. So we knew the activity it took to get there, but it was like, it's such a convoluted path. All right, we're down to the last 5 or so minutes. So I think that to best use this up, what I'd love to do is go around the horn one last time. And what I want to hear is your forecast. What are we going to see AI's impact and compensation? I'll give you an 18-month window, but I'd love to say by the end of 2025. Do we want to go to 1 year? Do we need to give ourselves an extra 6 months? What do y'all think? Should we go 1 year? All right. By the end of 2025, Jonathan, what are we going to see?
All right, mine's kind of a larger view of it, but I think that roles and things are going to start drastically changing, so that a lot of the tasks or things we're requiring from people will be kind of to the point of what we've been talking about. Like, a lot of what a salesperson would have done in the past is going to be narrowed because AI will be taking over a lot of it. So we got to be really fine-tuned on behaviors we need to have from humans and how do we compensate that. So I think it's going to be more about what is that worth from a human, and getting really fine-tuned on that to make sure it's working correctly. And that you look at that and you zoom out and say times that by the entire organization, not just salespeople, but everybody who has a hand in any type of compensation based on performance of some kind. So,
all right, Jen?
I mean, I think in general for AI and sales, where the signal to noise ratio is going to be dreadful, because suddenly the cost to annoy people will significantly drop. And as such, unfortunately or fortunately, echoing Jonathan, like that human piece is going to become more and more important. And so incentivizing it will be vital.
Oh, okay. Just because I can say it, what would you incentivize on the human side then? Since, the AI is going to handle all the automated stuff.
I think we need to learn that. Like, to some extent, booked meetings are a thing. AI can book a meeting. So then what? What is the human thing?
Yeah. Okay. Karen?
So maybe it's going out to dinner and all those things that Jason mentioned that are kind of, not good sales tactics.
I mean, that's an interesting question, right? You know, because if the initial emails and the heck, even a demo potentially going that direction. So we even touch in sales engineers. How long before the AI can handle our demos for us to get us going down these things would be interesting to see. I mean, look, because a good sales engineer is even harder to find than a good sales rep, in my opinion. That combination of skills and approach. And I would love to be able to just have an A. And now my AI Claude is going to show you the product. Ask it any question and it'll show it to you. And yeah, the rep is back to that personal side as we're kind of seeing events coming back. Blake?
Yeah, I love that using AI to measure how great you are at building relationships, let alone just the activities of sales, right? And what's your relationship quantity across all the people that you're talking to and the strength of that. I think the rate of what's possible and the rate of what'll actually be adopted by 2025, given how slow and tepid people are, will probably be drastically different. I think there'll probably be some really, really smart models with cultivated LLMs that have the framework to be able to either source the data, de-anonymize it, and still have it be relevant. Definitely by 2025 for this.
All right, Jason, I would say bring us home or zoom back out. Perhaps I use that as the better statement for you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that AI will never do is give you customer obsession. And my dream of an AI situation, of an AI compensated model, is to closely align the success and needs of a customer to what the compensation of the rep. And so if you have the almost all the ills in our world is due to misaligned incentives. And that a company's and I think AI is also going to narrow the feature gap between product and service across the board. So the differentiation is going to be customer success, customer obsession, and that type of thing, and AI lining those things up, which are not easy to measure and not easy to do, and require getting data from customers' performance, is going to be the holy grail for me in compensation models.
I think that'll be huge. I agree. Last minute here. So I just want to say I'm going to be a little bit of a wet blanket. I think we're going to see a few companies do some amazing things, and 26 will be the year for everybody to follow. I think 25 is the year we'll see a few leaders actually pop out. I don't think they're quite there yet. Everybody's testing, but I think that's what we'll get. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Julia, I think I stopped on time, so I'm not in trouble with you and Justin. Last words from you, boss.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you, everyone. Made so many notes. Eric, I can't help but ask you, if you were building exactly again or now, what would be your value prop in the light of AI?
I will say exactly actually has an amazing data set. I would have from day one, and I've actually advised a lot of companies, start collecting that data across your client base, anonymize, aggregate, but clean it as you do it. Get rid of the test cases and things so that you actually have a fully actionable data set that the AI can do the reporting out of from day one.